What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about speed and how that factors into our coon hunting. Let's go ahead and break that down. So I made the GPS video, and I thought a good video to go on after that might have been a GPS 2 video, but I think I'm going to go ahead and make the speed video because we need to get a bigger picture and kind of zoom out on this. Before I do that, guys, go ahead and check out Dog and Hunt. Really good gear, really good prices. Sent me over some leashes and some collars and stuff, some merch. So check those guys out, especially if you need some gear. But let's go ahead and roll into the speed video. Speed is one of those things that is dictated by a lot of things, right? A dog that can run 100 miles an hour and tree a coon in 1 second, guess what, guys? He cannot tree a coon if there is no coons to tree, right? So we can take the best dog in the absolute world. If you drop it into the desert, it is not going to tree a single thing, right? So we need to factor this kind of stuff into it. And one huge factor of it is coon population, right? So, in particularly, some places are pretty thick with coons because they hold them well. They have the food and they have the water for them, and people don't shoot them. Right? There's nobody hunting them. There's no pressure on them, so they're not getting ran to death and shot down to death. And there's nothing left out there to hunt, right? Because that is something that definitely happens. And I'll tell you that by firsthand experience. Our own property, you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a coon. After we were done with it, you couldn't tree a coon on that property for nothing because we shot everything, and we shot everything on all the state land too, and so did everybody else. So if we're taking the coons out of everywhere, there's no coons to be treed. I don't care how good your dog is. If there's not a coon there, he's not going to tree it. So that is one huge thing that plays a role in speed. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the second thing that plays a huge role in speed on a hunt time, right, is going to be your dog. Okay, is your dog a high level dog? Is your dog a low level dog? Is your dog a high performing dog or a low performing dog, right? So we have all of this to factor in as well. What we also have to factor into this is what stage in training is our dog. Maybe our dog is problematic in the sense that it hasn't figured things out quite easy enough. It hasn't figured things out enough to just move on, right? So we are stuck, maybe a dog constantly running tracks backwards. If a dog runs a track backwards, you'll never get it treed. And so there's a couple things that I talked about in the GPS video that kind of correlate to this video, like running in the swamp for 3 hours. That was a dog that was figuring out its nose still, right? It's running cold tracks, it's running tracks forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards before it figures it out. And on top of that, it's in the water. It's that much harder to figure out forwards, backwards, hotter, colder, that type of thing. So how new is our dog to actually hunting? How many tracks has our dog actually finished successfully? This all factors into it. And if we're letting it play out in the way that we just let our dog run and figure out these tracks, to me, it figures out hot and cold faster, in which direction faster if it is having that problem. And once it figures it out, then we have a step and platform that we can build speed off of, right? So we have the caliber of our dog, we have the quality of our woods, we have the population of our coons, and we also have the stage of training at which our dog is in. Okay, because one thing that I said is you got to calculate your speed and your strikes in the GPS video. All right, so we have to factor in the fact of, does our property that we're hunting, is it full of obstructions? Is it going to take a dog a long time to make its way through all this stuff that is out there on this chunk of property? Right? And one thing that I kind of want to sprinkle in here for you guys is I wanted to talk about private property versus public property. Okay, so I know plenty of guys. I was that guy that started. I didn't have any property to hunt besides public property. Okay, so everybody knows water, food, right? So nice farms, irrigation dishes, bean fields, corn fields, rivers, creeks, acorns, stuff like this that coons eat, and they have food and water, right? They have to have food and water. State land isn't always there, right? Some state land doesn't have water. Some state land doesn't have food. Some state land doesn't have coons on it, right? So some state land is just hindered, or some state land is completely shot to death and there's no coons in there for you to get treed. So that's another thing too. So if we're dropping a dog in a piece of state land that has no water, has no food, and people hunt it constantly to death, and take everything that they're shooting for fur, or they're just knocking stuff down, there's nothing in there that is going to get treated in a timely fashion. And that is something that I just want to point out to everybody here. So that's why I say in a lot of my videos, take time to find private land. Take time to do your due diligence and find out how much coons are actually on a piece of property. Because I'll tell you one thing right now, if I have a piece of property that has never had a coon shot off it, and it's loaded up next to a cornfield and a river and a creek, and they have everything and they're perfect little habitat to live in, I don't even need a dog to hunt coons. I can go out there and I can shoot as many as I want every single day, because they're no pressure, they're not getting hunted after, they're going to be easy to deal with, and we don't even need a dog, right? So what's the point in having a challenge if we're only going to hunt in the loadedest of loaded woods? We need to drop dogs in challenging situations and see how they perform there. So if I drop a dog in a piece of state land that I know has been hunted to death, and I drop a dog in a piece of state land that I know doesn't hold coons particularly well, and that dog manages to scrounge up a coon in that property or push off on somewhere else and get a coon treat, better on the dog, right? So what I want to talk about is speed has a lot of factors. So we need to keep in mind, and we need to keep that in our brains, how that plays out and how that affects us and how that affects our dogs and how that affects everything else. And at the end of the day, I've always said on the channel, dealing with dogs that you don't particularly know and dealing with dogs that don't know anything is something that we have to deal with at some point in time, right? So whether we're hanging on to the dogs after that first training stage, after that first, this dog knows what it's doing, it's figured out hot from cold, it's figured out all this kind of stuff, then we can start looking into building speed with our dog, and then we can start looking into challenging our dog, right? So one thing that I've said on the channel as well is I was very, very, very huge on if he don't tree within 20 minutes, and I mean maximum 20 minutes, I was absolutely fed up to the gills with this dog. And I was going off in the woods and I was finding it. You're going to tree up within 20 minutes or I don't think you're a good dog. That was me at the level of seriousness that I was taking it, right? So that was 15 years ago, right? So back in the day. And then we're talking about, that's another speed factor there too, is because if we're not taking coon hunting so seriously in that level, in the hunt time department and the speed department, then we can live down here in the dogs that take an hour to tree every time, right? In my personal opinion, like I've said on the channel before, a dog that will tree a coon is a coon dog. A dog that will do it better is a better coon dog, right? So that's kind of how we're going to approach speed. What ladder of seriousness are we actually trying to get to? What ladder of seriousness are we taking hunting? What ladder of seriousness are we expecting onto our dog? What type of stuff is that, right? And for me, holding a death grip on a dog and keeping severe pressure on it to perform and perform and perform, that is something that we need to save until we have it trained enough that it'll actually go tree coons, right? Because we don't want to follow up the beginning half and the dog just never tree coons, because that's the other thing too. If you follow up your dog before it trees coons, you're never going to get a coon treed. So speed is a huge thing. Speed is something that is quantified by things outside of our control, things outside of the dog's control, and it's also quantified by how we handle our dog and how we discipline our dog and how we dictate onto the dog how it needs to perform, right? So that is something there as well. And a lot of the things that I made in that GPS video are really pertaining to newer dogs, right? Really pertaining to maybe the first 2 or 3 coons that a dog's treed, right? Or a severely problematic dog that has taken a very long time to get something figured out. And if we're coming across our dog and we're going, I have a 5-year-old dog and he still does this kind of stuff, well, that's kind of the barrel that we grab from, and that's kind of the dog that we have. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I don't knock anybody for having a dog that will take a long time to tree a coon. But what I have a problem with is somebody disregarding and discarding a dog because of that. We can try to find somebody who prefers a dog that hunts slower. I know sometimes that when I've been in the woods and I've had more of the better days on my dogs, and I've had more of the better coon treens that I've had or dealt with or been in the woods with some of the better dogs that I've been with, it is almost disappointing how fast they tree a coon, right? Because sometimes we like getting wrapped up in the running of the dogs, right? So do I prefer a dog to take 4 hours to tree a coon? Absolutely not. Do I prefer a dog to take 3 seconds to tree a coon? Sometimes I prefer that, right? One thing that I did want to mention here is on the Stark video, I don't know if he watches these or not, but I watch him when he does this Houndsman Spotlights. The handler that he just had on, 10 minutes is what he's looking for, and he said you'll go a lot of places. And if you've ever batted dog tree in 10 minutes, it's something. And if you have a dog that consistently trees in 10 minutes, it's even something more special, right? So that's a very tall order, and that it's going to take a very particular kind of dog to get a coon treed in 10 minutes, repeatedly, recut after recut, in my solid opinion. Okay, so another thing here that I wanted to say on here is that speed equals pressure. Okay, so speed equals pressure, and that is both ways, right? Pressure can equal slower times. Pressure can also equal faster times. If we have a dog that is a severely high pressure dog, we're going to have a shorter hunt time because he is going to put the pressure on. He is going to get out there and he's going to get the job done. High pressure. And he's going to put pressure on coons that are on the ground to go up, right? So we have a high pressure situation that creates a faster hunt time and a faster finish time for our dog. And then also the opposite happens to us if we have coons that are high pressure coons, right? And I'm not talking about a patch of woods that they just get cooned in, or treed in every single other day. What happens when that happens, they just don't care. They'll just walk up the tree. Oh, I know what's happening this time, right? But if we have a chunk of woods and we're taking coons consistently, the only coons that are left out there are the ones that our dog has not treed yet, right? So the harder that we hunt a piece of property, the more that we take, the harder it is to get stuff off of that property, the harder it is for the dog to get stuff treed on that property. So that is pressure, right? So that is coons being pressured, right? High pressure coons will give you a lot more run for your money than what you think. So low population coons will give you a lot harder run for your money than what you think so. And dogs that aren't trained will give you a run for your money. Dogs that are problematic will give you a run for your money, and they will all affect your hunt speed. But I'm going to wrap that video up, guys. Do not forget to check out Dog and Hunt. They did me a huge solid over here at the channel, and I just want to shout out and say thank you guys for doing that. And then I also want to say don't forget to use the promo code at dogtra.com. I'm trying to put a lot of good stuff together here on the channel for you guys. A lot of good information coupled with good places that I like to support, and I think that they have my back and I got their back. So you know what, guys? Y'all keep them treed. Let me know if you guys want to see a second GPS vid.